The more I draw, the worse my art becomes. I just scrolled through my art page and was incredibly disgusted by what I saw. My favorite thing I made is still one of the first animations I posted. But as I went on making more, I lost drive and direction, and it really shows through the kinds of art that I was making. So, to remedy all of this, I decided I had to improve my art. I had to reinvigorate my passion for the subject, and to do that, I would have to get to the core of the issue. I can't draw.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man.
Most of the time when I open Clip Studio, my mind stutters. I have no idea what I'm doing and vaguely have a direction for what I want to achieve. But without the proper skills, I can't make anything. So, I'm going back to basics. For the first week, I highlighted 3 key areas that I want to focus on. The first is the breakdown. But what is a breakdown?
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here.
The breakdown is an essential precursor to the actual drawing. It's akin to an architecture's design before being sent to engineers to build. For example, if you want to draw a person, just drawing what you see doesn't necessarily mean you know how to draw that person, or even that you'll be able to redraw them later on. This is because the mind loves to generalize the world, making it easier to comprehend. Applying this same logic, being able to break down a subject into its rudimentary shapes and then restructuring those forms is the basis for being able to draw anything you can imagine. So the breakdown includes simplifying the structure, understanding the shapes, and then restructuring those shapes to recreate a reference. Without proper character structure before adding details, your art is guaranteed to look like doo-doo. So, having a shorthand to quickly represent poses will be incredibly effective in speeding up my process and improving clarity early on. I'm also an animator, so having a shorthand will really come in handy when I'm drawing the same characters over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. During this week, I decided to do quick sketches under 5 minutes each to warm up the 3 skills I chose to focus on. During the breakdown stage, I was able to recognize simple mistakes that would often worsen final illustrations, which was typically proportion. This would often happen because I'd be so focused on a single area that by the time I zoomed out, it wouldn't gel with the rest of the illustration. While forcing myself to draw within a limited time frame, I had to remain zoomed out, allowing me to better create more complete and accurate drawings. Slightly related to the first point is stylization. Throughout all my drawing experience, I've been inspired by many artists and their unique styles, but never really had one of my own. I would just utilize an art style for a project or illustration, then move on to another for the next piece. But with this exercise, that's all going to change. Whilst doing these character studies, I'm going to focus on simplifying as much as possible in a way that I understand, but that also makes it easier to draw. Take for example, one of my favorite artists, Robin Velg. He found notoriety for his illustrations and animations of hip-hop artists. He abstracts characters into simple avatars with distinct shading. To further simplify his abstraction, he typically draws his characters only from the front or in profile. This perspective carries on throughout the rest of his illustrations. Even his backgrounds and elements throughout his pieces are drawn in a simplified isometric perspective. Velg is a master of stylization, with his earlier works on his Instagram being much more abstract. By balancing all of these concepts, he brings everything together with incredible colors and beautiful animation to create visually stunning pieces. Taking all of this into account, I'm going to focus on stylization through simplification. With this in mind, the perfect artist to reference is Rhino Tuner. He draws super quick, keeping each step simple, but is still able to render incredibly detailed works in a really small amount of time. This is the reference I'll be using for this study, and I chose it because, well, it's simple. It's only the head, there's no complex materials, and the lighting is not crazy dynamic, but it's not overly flat, so it'll still be interesting to draw and to study. Anyway, onto the drawing. First things first, I'm breaking down the character into the main masses in frame, the head and the ribcage, focusing on their position and proportions. From there, I construct guides for the rest of the anatomy, and that's basically the rough. To clean up the line art, I used a higher opacity brush and went over the rough on the same layer, erasing and adding darker lines, mainly to the outline, until the rough was smooth. Next, still sticking to Rhino's workflow, I lay down some simple base colors, and by selecting each color group with the 1 tool, I get to rendering. Throughout this entire illustration, I'm focused solely on simplifying wherever I can. To cut back on overcomplicating the study, I didn't draw the left eye, kept the hair to a basic silhouette, and limited my tools, using only 2 brushes and about 9 layers. Rhino uses only 2! All in all, this study came out super unique and lively, and I think this punchiness is a result of keeping things graphic and simple. Third, and most important of all, is color. Ever since I started drawing, I have always avoided color like I'm Weave Nation certified. In elementary, I'd pick as few crayons as possible and finish a whole page just like that. As I grew up, I completely ditched even these few basic tools and stuck with lead. I would have thought this to be a massive problem when I moved to digital, but the great thing about working on a computer is you don't have the same limitations as pencil and paper. There are even workflows to go from grayscale to color, which is how I made this illustration. However, without proper understanding of color theory and relationships, and how to apply them effectively across my characters, even this cheat won't save my art from looking like doodle. So, throughout this exercise, I'll be using my amazing observation skills to choose colors that make sense, and build foundational skills to build up from there. The best application of this third skill was this illustration. The workflow was pretty standard, once again focusing on keeping it simple.
Silly boy!
While that's not anything too extravagant, I think this is the best use of color because of the way I handled these 2 materials. Whilst I was drawing the skin, I was keeping in mind how the light from the environment interacted with the character. I don't understand too well the concepts of color theory and light and shadow, but I was able to apply them well enough in this illustration to adequately convey the lighting situation from the reference. Even though I did the skin well, my favorite part of this whole illustration is the way I handled the jeans. Now to be honest, I couldn't even tell you what I did, but I was able to discern and plan out how I would capture this material without going back to old habits and keeping things simple. I shaded the folds and wrinkles by layering different tints of blue to capture the natural color variation from the stretching and the wear of the jeans. I also noticed a greenish tint on the frayed edges of the pants. On top of all this was the stitching, which was just a few dashes and blots of a dark faded blue. All of this was definitely exaggerated in the illustration, but by simply paying closer attention to the patterns of color, I was able to recreate a convincing render of the jean shorts. There is a secret fourth focus that almost had its own category. One of the things I found most discouraging as I draw is the amount of time it takes to get from disgusting to masterpiece. Just imagine, you laid down some basic colors and now you're trying to move from this flat piece to a fully rendered artwork. How does that even happen? Turns out it takes a lot of patience and hours upon hours of meticulous technique that I don't have. So as I'm rendering, I'm placing down lines with no idea of where I'm headed with it. The reason this isn't its own category is within the other sections, I've arranged them not only to improve those specific areas in my drawing, but also to save time by making each drawing stage more efficient. All in all, this was a great lesson on a few fundamentals of art. In only a week, I was able to pick up and apply the basics of structure, stylization, and color across several illustrations that actually turned out alright. As I continue working on projects and developing my skill, I'm going to continue on with this kind of light, focused study, enjoying the process and getting back to basics.